Good morning and welcome to the Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome those who are with us in the sanctuary and welcome those of you who are joining us on Zoom. If you are here in the sanctuary and you are a visitor, you should see in the pews one of these yellow cards. And I noticed there were some other yellow cards in there, but this one says, welcome guests. So if you will please fill this out, that way we have your information and we can get a hold of you. And also, if you are here with us for the first time or the first time in a long time, please stay here after the service. In the back, we have some lovely, informed, and welcoming folks who would like to meet with you. So please stay for a meet and greet in the sanctuary. We would like to get to know you better. So please stay for that. The best way to get a hold of us is on the ORUUC Facebook group. You'll find a variety of announcements and things that you need to know. We're not going to inundate you with too much stuff or memes or whatever, but if you want some information about what's going on right here in our congregation and online, please check that out. And in our second hour, we have our faith formation hour. We have youth faith formation right down the hallway, and we've also got opportunities to join online. And we have some information for adults as well. Prayer requests, that's next. I've got a lengthy list today, so tuck in. Prayer request. If you have a prayer, you can text it to the number or email to the number right there. Also, if you're in the sanctuary, we have the Book of Life right here. You can write in that. Usually we do that during altar building, but I tell you what, anytime that you feel moved for a prayer request, just come on up and write it up there. It's right there on that book. Now, for many, many years, we have sent half the offering that we collect right back out into the community to an organization whose mission we support. This week is a fifth Sunday, and fifth Sundays are special because those are the Minister's Discretionary Fund. And this month, the Minister's Discretionary Fund has chosen the Unitarian Universalist Social Committee's Haiti Crisis Response Team. Haiti has been in political turmoil for many months, and on August 14th was hit with an earthquake. So please be generous, be the generous people that you are in supporting both our congregation and the crisis response in Haiti. And that noise that we started with happened just a few minutes too late because it would have been perfect because we are having a fire drill. So today, right after the service, you will be led out into the pavilion by the safety team and we will practice our safety measures. We make sure that we know what to do when we have a crisis. So that will be our fire drill. You will note that as I speak here, I am not wearing a mask, but I've got one hanging from my ear. And as soon as I'm done talking, I'm going to put this back on. And we are a mask-wearing congregation. And I also encourage you to cover your entire face, nose and all, with the mask. Not eyes, sorry. Not eyes, yes. To cover your nose on down. Does anybody else have any other announcements? We got a free call. You have an announcement? Oh, okay, thank you. Todd would like to announce that he is here. Welcome, Todd. And that's a perfect segue to our peace greetings. This is the time where we, both in person and online, greet one another. So if you're in the sanctuary and you would like to rise and greet other people in the sanctuary, you can handshake, you can fist bump, you can hug if you're comfortable, but make sure that you are with another person who is also comfortable doing the same. But if you're in the sanctuary, you can walk around. If you are on Zoom, please turn on your video if you feel comfortable and give a wave, give a high five, give a peace sign, whatever. But let's all welcome each other in person and online.
We take this time to stop and remember, remembering who we are, where we have come from, where we intend to travel, remembering the depth and sacredness, the profound worth of each of us, our community, and of each human being. We come to remember our commitment to justice and compassion as well, and to hold forth our commitment to see and address suffering, regardless of who it is that suffers. We recognize that this path we have chosen, as full of light and joy as it sometimes can be, is not an easy path. We trust and open our hearts to one another, take strength from one another, and make this space, this time, holy by our commitment.
Spirit of life and love, we gather this morning to commit again to the beloved community and to the journey through life that often requires from us courage, strength, and love. Starting from a place of gratitude and of curiosity, may we find it possible today and every day to encounter and honor the holy we find in each other. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. I invite you now to join in a time of silent centering.
I now invite you, whether you are here in person or joining us virtually, to sing along with our opening hymn, Instruments of Peace. Spirit of creation's glory, deep source of abundant grace, wellspring of the dream of justice, the builder of freedom's place, help us learn to show forgiveness, help us share the mercy we've known, and when surest faith has fallen, may we be instruments of hope. Spirit of redeeming sorrow, all around we can hear your song, singing in the darkest hour, singing when the night is long. Help us find the lonely traveler, help us heal the wounds that destroy, in the midst of grief overflowing, may we be instruments of joy. Spirit of sustaining power, our world is beset by war, vision of a world united dies not in the battle roar. Help us hear the distant fire, help us know fear's sweet release. When the flame of anger rises, may we be instruments of peace. Spirit of our heart's own promise, as one let us learn to acclaim beauty in each soul's own story, the worth of our common name. Spirit's challenge, Spirit's wisdom, Spirit's will to help us live every day and every hour. May we be instruments of love.
This is the time in our service, we call it building our altar. What that means is bringing your full self into this space, into our Zoom joining as well, bringing your full self into this hour. And that requires knowing where you are right now. Not, I'm here in the sanctuary or I'm here on Zoom, but I'm here trying to be an instrument of peace and it's really hard. Or I'm here needing the sweet release of my fear, or I'm here because my commitment to justice makes me show up. Take stock of where you are in your life journey at this point in time and make meaning of it. Signify it here. You can light a candle, the light that you're carrying, or the hope that you hold. You can come over to the nature table. We have just a beautiful table. Honestly, even if you don't want to take something, if you just need to see some beauty, I invite you to walk up to this corner and take a look. And there is over there a special thing today. The green plant is lemon verbena, and it smells so good. So this is also a time to come into the fullness of all of your senses and the joy of creation. If you have something you would like spoken in the prayer that will follow, we have a book of life. We also have the, you can send it in online to prayers@oruuc.org or text 865-224-6388. And those of you joining us on Zoom, you can write something in the chat box that you would like to share. What's in your heart, what you're carrying this day, another way to share. Also on Zoom, light a candle, light your own candle and hold it up, and there will be some shots of the gallery showing those of you who are joining us on Zoom who are lighting candles this morning. Wherever you are on your journey, this is the time to bring yourself fully into the hour. Let us build our altar together.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding
As we enter into prayer, I invite you to begin by paying attention to the sounds around you, noticing what's in the room, the rustling. Maybe there's a purring kitty at home somewhere. Just listen for a moment. And you might want to close your eyes or let your gaze soften on one point and feel the weight of your body where you sit, the floor beneath you. Let your body be loose, heavy, still. Let your breath take you inward, one breath at a time, breathing in, breathing out. Breath in and out. And if your mind gets busy, as minds like to do, that's okay. Say hello to that thought and then let it go. And return, you can always return to your breath. O Spirit of life, great love that unites us, we come this day bearing nothing less than all that is our lives. We bring our grief, our joy, our questions, our hopes to this hour, that they might be shared in community. Let us hear now the prayers of the community. We have one who prays for those who have lost their battle with depression. Oh, depression, that pulling down, that emptiness, that darkness that can take away all light. Let us hold in heart and mind all whose lives have been lost to this disease and all who struggle now. May we be those companions who show up and stay present when our loved ones, when our neighbors, when anyone who comes across our paths needs companioning. And likewise, we hold in care those whose days are ending due to cancer. Please hold these families, these people, their suffering, in the love that holds us all. We have a prayer for those who cannot evacuate from Hurricane Ida, barreling down now on the coast of Louisiana. We are much more prepared than when Katrina struck on exactly this day 16 years ago. But we know that this is a fierce storm and that there are many who lie in the path of its danger. Let us hold all the people, all the rescue personnel, our neighbors to the south in care. We have one who prays that we may hold in love all who walk the hills and the valleys of committed relationships, especially those who are struggling and striving to better love each other. Let us pause and take a moment now. Where are you? Where are we in our committed relationships? Let us know that there is always the opportunity to open ourselves to love, especially in the challenging times. This person also asked for prayers for friends and neighbors struggling with illness and loss, that they may be comforted and experience healing. And as this one writes, so true, may we be the friends that those around us need. Let us hold in care, tender care, our own Chuck Flanagan. Chuck is in Methodist Medical Center, feeling better today than yesterday, but struggling with pneumonia, very serious and very ill. Let us hold Chuck in care and his wife Jane as Chuck receives the treatment there that he needs and moves toward recovery. And if you would like to know how to get a card to Chuck, please see me after the service. We have prayers today also for our soldiers who serve at home and abroad, and most especially and tenderly for those young service people whose lives were lost in Afghanistan this week. May we hold their families in our love and our appreciation for the service of these mostly very young service people. Love and care to all affected by what is going on in Afghanistan today. We know that not all prayers are ready to be spoken. Some are too tender or too tentative. Let us hold and care also all that is in our hearts that is not yet ready to be spoken. O God of all things, Spirit of love and life, we lift up these prayers of the community. We ask for blessings. We hold in our hearts these requests, spoken and unspoken. Amen. So it turns out that what I have in my book is not happening, and there was an email late this morning that I didn't see. We have a special collection this morning. It is for Haiti. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is an organization that has people working directly with the Haitians to get help where it is needed. And so I invite you to be the generous people that you are, holding in mind the astounding needs of the people of Haiti this morning. Our morning offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you so much for that beautiful, haunting music. I invite you to stand as we dedicate our offering. I feel the weight of this morning. I think there is so much weighing on us. And I just want to say that every time you share of your own bounty, every time we step forward to be the generous people that we're called to be, there's that much more hope in the world. I hope you can feel that, because not one of us here knows enough to be hopeless. That would be too easy and too self-important. So let us hold these gifts and let us envision what we have shared going out into this community to bring hope and light, and going to Haiti where it is so needed. Thank you.
Rooted in love, we covenant, together in peace, to face conflict with compassion, to see strength in diversity, to share laughter and cheers, to honor the profound in each of us. With purpose and passion, we care for one another and grow together, rooted in love.
Hello? Okay, there we go. I'd like to invite the children and anyone else who would like a seat on the floor to come on down. Got a nice crowd today. Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm going to tell you a familiar story, but I did kind of want to frame it in a way that's saying that at the time, this story was a bit shocking to folks, and I'll tell you why. So one day, Jesus was speaking to people, and they were gathered around Jesus, much the way that you are gathered around me. And somebody asked him, well, how do you get into the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus was like, we've been over this. Remember that golden rule I keep talking about over and over again? And they nodded, but one person decided to challenge Jesus. And they said, well, that rule is love thy neighbor as I love myself. But who is my neighbor? But Jesus, and instead of answering directly, Jesus had adaptive leadership skills long before MBA people told him he needed to. And he knew how to put them right into the zone of productive disequilibrium. So Jesus just decided to tell them a story. And he told the story of a man who was going on a journey from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, some of us have heard this story many times and are familiar with that, but at the time, that would have inspired fear in the folks sitting there, because that was known as the way of blood, because there was all sorts of peril along that path, and it was twisty and windy, and people would hide in there and jump out and rob people. So already people were prepared for something to happen, and that's exactly what happened. There was a man walking down the road, and he was attacked by robbers. He was stripped of all his clothes. All his possessions were taken from him, and he was left for dead. But there was someone that came walking down the road, and this was a priest in the temple, a priest of this man's own faith. But the priest saw the man lying there in pain, half dead, all his possessions taken. And the priest promptly crossed the street, kept on walking. Another man came by. This was a Levite, and a Levite was a helper in the church, someone who helped with music and who helped run the church. And the Levite saw the man lying there, half dead, all his possessions taken, and he also walked across the street and kept going down the way of blood. And then a third person came down the road, and this person was from Samaria, a Samaritan. Now, we know this story very well as the Good Samaritan, but to the folks listening that day, that would have struck fear, because the Samaritans and the people of Jerusalem did not like each other, had never liked each other, and there was a lot of tension. So to have your mortal enemy walking down the road when you're laying there dead would have inspired a lot of fear in folks. But it was the Samaritan who stopped and helped the man. He gave him oil to clean his wounds. He took off his coat. He even carried him back on a donkey to an inn and stayed with him overnight. And when he left, he paid the innkeeper to continue to care for the man until he was well. So then Jesus looked at the crowd and asked, "Who is my neighbor?" And the man answered, "The one who shows mercy." And Jesus instructed the crowd to go forth and do the same. And I ask all of you to go forth and do the same. And for now, we are going to go out to the playground. If I can have folks in the center aisle rise and sing the children out. If you are in 5th grade and under, you come out. 5th grade and older, you'll stay in worship.
What I chose to talk about today is a difficult subject, one that I, and perhaps some of you, have struggled with. It has to do with anger, what we do with it, and how we might integrate it into our lives without it taking over our lives. But I want to recognize right up front that anger is real, that it is often very much justified, and that it cannot be wished away or glossed over or made to disappear with nice thoughts. It is here, it is real. Let me begin by telling you a story from my own life, which has to do with anger. I have an old friend. Let's call him Roger. Roger and I have known one another since we were kids, riding our bikes through the neighborhood, having adventures, sometimes arguing, and getting angry with one another. But we always found a way forward and have remained friends these many years. But the last decade or so have proven to be more difficult, and our friendship has teetered and threatened to disappear altogether. Years ago, Roger and I began to see, and I assume experience, life differently. It began with religious, spiritual things, and when some of those discussions turned tense, we learned not to go there. Then politics, and questions of how to understand reproductive, sexual, racial problems in our nation caused us to curtail our range of conversation even more. But I loved Roger. I still love Roger. I have seen him listen carefully and tenderly to the sorrows of others. I have seen him freely and generously give of himself in work, time, money, possessions, and other resources to care for people for whom he had no obligation. I have experienced that generosity myself. When I needed help, he was there for me not once but several times. Roger is a good man. But today I have conflicting emotions when I say Roger is a good man, because I hate some of his opinions. I despise some of his allegiances. I seethe when learning of some of his choices. Perhaps some of you have a Roger in your life. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once gave a talk about the place such conflict has in our lives. He told a story, a sort of children's story or fable, about the time that the Buddha was visited by Mara. Mara in Buddhist writing is the demonic celestial being that tormented Prince Siddhartha while he sat and waited under the Bodhi tree for enlightenment, terrorizing him, tempting him, doing anything to distract him from his determination to seek enlightenment. The Buddha's disciples tried to turn away Mara from visiting, saying that he was the Buddha's enemy, being the cause of so much suffering of not only the Buddha, but all mankind. They were surprised when the Buddha greeted Mara warmly as an old friend and invited him to sit down for tea. When Mara complained to the Buddha that he would not like being the demonic celestial being anymore, the Buddha replied that it was not always pleasant being the Buddha either, but that each of them had a role to play in the unfolding of life. When I first heard this story, I was reminded of the Christian New Testament when Jesus told his followers, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." At another time, he told the story of the Good Samaritan, which many understand as teaching that loving our neighbor means loving everyone, whether or not they shared our beliefs or our culture or our identity. Jesus said that it is easy to love one's friends. Everyone can do that. But counsel people to a more difficult path. Love your enemies. And finally, in each of our pews in the rack in front of you, you will find a card listing our Unitarian Universalist principles. The very first principle clearly and simply declares the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Buddhist and Christian teachings, including our UU principles, counsel us to intend wellness toward, to love, to value each person, even those with whom we struggle. But how do we pray for those who persecute us, or for that matter, persecute anyone, and at the same time holding them accountable, hold them responsible for their actions? How do we struggle to oppose and end that persecution without harboring dark judgments and assign lesser value to those responsible? And we do have to struggle. If you look back at that card in the pew, you'll see that in the second principle, we are committed to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. For many of us, this sometimes puts us into real and emotional conflict, sometimes even within our own families. It's easy when surrounded by those with whom we identify and agree to fully and embrace and celebrate the first principle, the worth and dignity. It is tempting when engaging fully in the second principle, justice and equity, to assign a lesser importance on the first when regarding those with whom we disagree passionately. Would it be untrue to say that many of us, including myself, sometimes have a hard time with this counsel? In a time of heightened national partisanship, a time when even inside families, people are aghast, perplexed, and infuriated by beliefs and actions which make no sense to them, which appear to be only possible for persons afflicted with some darkness of the mind and soul. What do we do with powerful feelings in response to events in our world? Certainly not deny or submerge them. We feel what we feel. And after a century of Freud, I think we've learned the dangers of denying what we feel. I know myself that when I feel angry in these situations, it is not easy. It is, in fact, difficult for me to think well of those who I believe are responsible. It is easy in our distress to disparage those to whom we are opposed, to see them as not worthy of our compassion, to not intend wellness toward, to not love, to not remember their inherent worth and dignity. I see this in myself. I have seen it in the eyes and words of you, my ORUUC family. I have seen it in the faces of friends and family, the anger, the admission of unkind and hostile thoughts toward the others. Where does all this lead? A few months ago, I became part of the group at ORUUC studying Buddhism, where we listen to and discuss a reading or talk on a regular basis. My understanding so far is that Buddhism teaches that all beings suffer. It teaches us that by opening our hearts and minds to not only our own suffering, but that of all beings, compassion and loving kindness can grow. It teaches us, as our hearts open and become spacious, this compassion can extend to everyone. What has most drawn my attention has been the idea that it is better to open one's eyes, mind, and heart to what makes us suffer, and to greet what we meet with openness and acceptance. Compassion and acceptance is directed toward suffering. We say the Buddhist prayer of loving kindness, or metta, in our services here often. The Buddhist loving kindness prayer starts by wishing well toward oneself and gradually expands outward from there, eventually wishing good intentions for the entire world and all beings, even our enemies. May I be at peace. May you be at peace. May all beings be at peace. Can we hold all beings in our heart, even as we oppose them as enemies? Can we refuse to make them monsters or cretins or unworthy of compassion? While I have thought of myself as a person who tried his best to be loving, the invitation to bring acceptance of the fact of suffering into the picture has changed me. I've been moved to ask myself, how much do I really know of kindness, of acceptance or love? How much of these things do I actually find alive in my heart? It is not easy to feel love when one is suffering. How do you seek and practice love when what you are feeling is anger or despair or any of the many ways in which we suffer? There is something familiar about this and an experience almost all of us share. It's a small, trivial example, but picture yourself driving. You have somewhere that you need to get to by a certain time, and it's really important to you. You may be nervously drumming your fingers on the wheel, watching the traffic get more and more dense, more and more slow. What in the world is the holdup? You might mutter. You notice some cars trying to cut ahead or refusing to yield. You begin to feel impatient with the thought of being late, then angry with the drivers around you, perhaps one especially, who you see is taking steps which make the situation even worse. Some of the drivers are arrogant, you think, and have no wish to cooperate. Some may wish to be cooperative, but are not good drivers, you think. Some, you believe, are deep within their own thoughts and not even aware of the situation or how they might help. If they would cooperate, if they would pay attention, if they would learn to drive, if they would only show a little courtesy. Regardless, a slowdown is occurring as your irritation turns to anger. Dark thoughts of other drivers' intentions multiply and grow stronger. Does this sound familiar? But many of us have come to realize and appreciate how road rage affects our body, mind, and spirit. Many people have learned to let go, accept the traffic just as it is, and remembering themselves, bring their hearts back to equanimity and peace. I've been wondering, can we also learn to do this in other situations? And if so, how? I want to suggest one small way that might be described by the word remembering. I use remembering as the ability and practice of bringing something that you already know into your awareness. In brain research over the last few years, an interesting observation has been made. We may think of our memory as a physical recording, such as a book or set of digital code written in computer memory. This way of imagining memory suggests that somehow in our minds we read this encoding and thus have the memory. But what scientists have observed is more like this. Our brain recreates the memory. Or to be clearer, our brain recreates the experience. We experience a new version, subject to the loss of some details, the addition of some new details, and created in the context of our present state of mind. The point here is to see that how we remember something has pliability. It can and does change, and is vulnerable to change by who we are in the present. How can we love our enemies? If we can remember that all human actions spring up out of a common source, if we can remind ourselves that just as we need peace and wellness, all beings do, perhaps that is the way to maintain compassion, even love toward everyone, even as we act passionately to oppose the things they do. To take the time to practice seeing the commonality of all human beings. I say practice because it seems to me that only with a concerted, deliberate intention can we maintain the powerful balance involved in both loving and being in opposition. We remember the common state of all human beings, both friend and enemy. We remember their humanity, their suffering that we all share. We remember and wish an end to their suffering, just as we wish and work for an end to the suffering of those they may persecute. I'd like to end with one last story, which has to do with my father. He's been gone about 15 years now, when he was well into his 80s. About 17 years ago, he came to visit for a few months. And since he still drove short distances and wanted to bring his car, I flew up north and drove back to Tennessee with him, doing most of the driving. Still, he insisted on driving an hour or so now and again. He loved to drive. One such time when he was driving, the freeway traffic slowed and came to a crawl. It inched along bumper to bumper, 5 or 10 miles per hour, mile after mile. I noticed my father becoming distressed. And soon after, he said he needed to get to a bathroom. I looked around. There was no place to pull off. My father was a patient, courteous driver, especially polite to the big semi-rigs around us. That's why I was so shocked when suddenly he pulled into the breakdown lane, saying, "I can't wait. I think there's an exit ramp not far ahead." Here he was pulling a maneuver that I had always associated with people who felt entitled or arrogant or believed themselves more important than everyone else. I looked over and saw people's angry faces as my father drove slowly but steadily forward. Around the curve, the exit ramp came into view maybe a half-mile ahead. But just before that, a large truck was parked in the breakdown lane. He put on his blinker and tried to move back into traffic. The cars tightened their distances. They would not allow this arrogant usurper back in. Face after face scowled or turned stonily away, while my father's distress and now humiliation grew. Finally, a young woman, perhaps no more than 20, looked over at my father, turned away, then looked again. I saw something soften in her face, and while still holding in her eyes the exasperation and annoyance of the traffic, she slowed and with a wave of her hand invited him back in. So may we all. The call to action for today, this week, is to pause and reflect. Let us make the time to wish the end of suffering upon all beings, even those whose actions offend us. Let us hold in our hearts for the length of a breath the value and worth of all persons. We do this so that when we are full of anger, we will remember ourselves, who we are, and the path we struggle to follow.
I invite you to sing with me our closing hymn, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. Go in peace.